Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Apostle Ad-Din. I make videos talking about Islam critically, leaving Islam, and other related topics. For that reason, today's topic is kind of important, despite the content being a little bit silly and satirical. The topic itself is important. We'll be talking about a bunch of hadiths, and I'll be joined by a special guest, a surprise guest that I didn't announce earlier, one of the members of the Discord server who helped me find a bunch of these hadiths and organize them and everything. So I'll be introducing him in a second. So what we're going to do today is go through a few hadiths. First of all, explain what is Quran, what is hadith, what is the difference between them, what is the importance of hadith, and what problems do these hadith pose, or are they just funny or silly to look at? That's up to you to decide. So if you want to interact with the live stream, leave a live chat. Maybe I'll highlight it if I have a second. Not taking any callers today, but there you can still be involved in the live stream anyway. Okay, so I guess that's all the introduction that we need. I'm going to be adding Abu from Aladdin to the live stream. Hey, Abu, how's it going?
Hey, Aladdin. It's going great. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being here.
No problem. My pleasure.
You excited?
Hell yeah.
Let's do this. Hell yeah, blasphemous just from the start.
Astaghfirullah.
So I put them loosely into a few categories, but most of them are just kind of silly. But we'll start with this category called Stop Thinking. Oh, wait. We're supposed to talk about... I just said we're supposed to talk about a bunch of things.
The narrations.
Yeah, okay. So what is Quran and what is Hadith? For people who might not be familiar or don't explicitly know.
Okay. So Quran, that's the words that Allah has spoken. They are neither created nor are like any other, I guess, creation in the world. There's two beings in the universe that are just that were, will be, and are always, and that's Quran and Allah. So Quran is the literal words of Allah that were spoken to Jibril, and Jibril, or Gabriel, the angel, and then later on taken to Muhammad, and Muhammad to us humans, Muslims. So
it's worth mentioning, as you were saying, they're eternal, they're uncreated.
yes.
The Quran itself, not the book, but the essence of it, or the words and everything in the Quran, has existed since always, right? Since
always,
before
yes.
creation.
Doesn't even make sense to say since. Exactly.
Yeah. In the preserved tablet, as it's called, which brings up a lot of questions, like did it exist alongside Allah for as long as Allah has existed? Is it an extension of Allah? But that's not what we're going to get into today.
No, I think it's an interesting topic because when I was a believer, the way I looked at it was that we were created in time, among time, so we couldn't really understand anything beyond time. So it just didn't make sense to wonder about those things.
Right.
But then later on, through the Hadith and Quran, we discovered that Allah does exist in the time, space-time, I guess, continuum. Yeah. So back to the Hadith. Hadith are narrations of actions or words that Muhammad took once upon a time, 1400 years ago. So any word that was spoken by Muhammad or an action would be written down by his Sahaba, friends, and they were passed down to us, and we can get into that in a bit. But we have to distinguish الحديث القدسي والحديث من الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the difference is al-Qudsi, which is the divine hadith. That is a hadith that is a narration from Allah. So there's the Quran, that is the words of Allah, but then through some hadith, some of them are hadith Qudsiya, meaning they are hadiths that are actually the words of Allah. But that's a minority of the hadith. The ones we're concerned with today are the prophets, the hadith.
Like those would be considered in some way revelation, I suppose, the hadith al-Qudsiyya.
Exactly, yeah.
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 And just to be clear, I don't know if I necessarily agree with saying blanket that the Quran is uncreated, because Allah created the Quran but I guess what you mean is that it has been there before the creation of everything else. Like everything that has been created, in time,
Yeah.
and the Quran has been there before time. But I guess, a Muslim could argue that Allah did create the Quran, so it is not uncreated, unlike Allah.
So, um, as per the Muslim perspective, Quran
Mhm.
is not created. It is not a creation. At least that's what they claim.
Mhm.
Whatever that means, feel free to look into it. But yeah, that's
Right,
apparently what Muslims believe in.
right.
Yeah.
So the
Uh,
Quran, again, to make it clear for those who don't know, the Quran is, or this is a mushaf, or this is a tafsir, with the words of the Quran in it. But this would be a collection of pages of the Quran. The Quran itself is not this book. It is, I guess, the essence of this book, or all the verses. And I don't know which versions, right? Because there are multiple
mhm.
qira'at. So Lawh al-Mahfuz, which one does it have? I don't know,
Oh,
but that's besides the point today. Point is, this is Quran, or a copy of the Quran, and this is what's the most sacred. This is what is unchanged. This is what is supposedly preserved, supposedly unchanged, and supposedly the word of God. The hadith are, as you said, things that people wrote about Muhammad, or Muhammad did say or do, and they wrote it down. And the Quran was compiled into pages kind of as the revelation came, as people started memorizing it. And it was only maybe 70 years after Muhammad's death that it was compiled officially, and a bunch of versions were burned by Uthman, right?
yes, exactly. Yeah. Never
Right.
to be seen again.
Yeah. And there are still a bunch of versions of Quran, but they're mostly similar,
Yeah.
mostly being the key word. But the
Yeah. So
hadith were only compiled over 200 years after Muhammad's death.
yeah, and the versions of Quran that we have today are all the result of the one version that Uthman kept. So
Mhm.
it wasn't really only Uthman, as at least that's the Islamic opinion. It was all of the Sahaba agreeing to just keep one version. But
Right.
there's proof that that wasn't the case, but it doesn't matter. It's a long story. All we have to know is that the one or the 10 versions or 20 versions that we have today are a result of that one version that was kept.
Right.
Yeah,
And so the Quran is very important in Islam. Uh, but what about the hadiths? Are they important?
they are very important, my friend,
Hmm.
because we gotta pray, we gotta fast, we gotta do Hajj. And how do we know how to do all of these things without knowing the steps to do them? How the Prophet himself acted? How do we know about the Prophet? So, yeah, they're very critical to understand all of Islam.
Also, how do we understand this book? Well, the tafsir derive from the hadith, right? The exegesis derive from the hadith.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
If we
It
were to
comes,
get rid of the like all the secondary sources, like the hadith and the sirah, which is the biographies of the prophet, then this on its own, a lot of it is not understandable. And even
most of
with,
the ads.
yeah, yeah, most of it makes no sense. Like, the stories are unconnected. You don't know hal ataka hadith or whatever. Like, did you hear
Yeah,
of the story of so and so? And we didn't hear that story. So
yeah,
it
exactly.
would be very confusing, and it is already very confusing, but even more confusing. And like you said, a lot of the things that you got to do, like prayer, how do you pray, how many times you pray, all that kind of stuff in the
Yeah,
hadith. So most Muslims in the world are Sunni Muslims, and they take um, the Sunni hadiths. There are also Shia Muslims, and they disagree on the gradings of hadith and so on. And there are Quranists, and there are other categories as well, but those are the ones that come to mind right now.
yeah,
Um, the Quranists are people who say that you need, or Quran only Muslims, you just need the Quran, and that's all. That's all you need. You don't need the hadith, and everything else is just through tawatur, through being given the information from the people before you. So people tell you how to pray. You don't need the hadith to tell you how to pray, right?
yeah. So there's many systems, and some of them might work, some of them might not. Sunnah, the Sunnah system does work, but that's what we'll be looking into today.
Mhm.
A lot of the questionable things in the Hadith, because again, like there's a Hadith even like as intricate as what your right finger, should be doing during sujood or tashahhud, which is the last posture that you should be doing in salat. It's
Right.
very accurate and it's very important. Yeah.
Okay. And before we get to the hadiths that we want to read today, how do we know which hadiths Muhammad actually said? and which ones were fabricated or were not
Yeah.
trustworthy? How do we grade them?
So in the Hadith, we have categories: Sahih, Da'if, Hasan. There's Makdub. They're all just grades on the Hadith. They're like peer-reviewed. They've been told by someone to someone to someone, and they allegedly check the validity of the Hadith, the trustworthiness of um, the reader, the guy that the person that that heard the hadith, and they claim that there's like an intricate system, which, like, to be honest, I wasn't around a couple hundred years ago, so I wouldn't be able to confirm or deny it. But I would. It would be a great. It would be good to at least look at the results that they reached.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So part of how they grade a hadith is by the reputation, I suppose, of the narrator. Was he known to be an honest person? Was he known to not be an honest person? And the people along the chain of narration and so on, which is extremely subjective. It's not really a science by any means. But the point of all this is to say there is a way to that Muslims, or at least Sunni Muslims, are supposed to believe in the authenticity of many of these hadiths. And a Sahih hadith is like the highest grade of authenticity. Hasan is a degree under that, right?
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
yeah, there's Da'if hadith, which means weak. You can ignore that. And the reason that we make all these clarifications is because often a lot of problems that we face as people who are thinking critically about Islam, a lot of them come from the Quran, but a lot of them also come from the Hadith, because the Hadith is how Islam is built. Like, Islam is built on a lot of Hadith and Sirah. So when we find a problem, sometimes apologists have this approach of saying, well, this one is a da'if hadith, or one of the people who narrated this along the way was known to be a liar, therefore we can't trust this hadith, just for the sake of like getting you to not think about it too hard. So we're
So
only focusing on the Sahih hadith for the most part, and some Hasan hadiths as well.
yeah.
And you told me your opinion is that Hasan and Sahih are very close. Why is that?
Yes. So let's go from the bottom up. Da'if, which is weak, aren't to be taken unless they're supported by another Sahih or Hasan hadith. So if it's da'if or weak, and you can't support it with a stronger grading of another hadith, then it is not to be trusted. So when you go up a level to the Hasan, I guess best translation would be okay, or it's good enough. It is beyond any doubt that it was said, but it would not be. So for the Sahih, it would be above and beyond. It would be like they'd be way more sure than they even need to be. So Sahih is just beyond any shred of a doubt. And Hasan isn't questionable, but it's just not as, I guess,
So it meets the
backed.
bare minimum of verification standards.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
And I do have to apologize for my English. It's not my first language, so apologies.
You're doing fine.
Take some time
Don't
to
worry
get there.
about it. And sometimes what happens is you hear, like, for example, I heard the hadith that a martyr gets 72 virgins in heaven, right? We've all heard some version of that or another. And I found out at some point, don't quote me on this, but I remember finding out that Muslims were saying this is not a Sahih hadith, and this whole concept, essentially saying this whole concept is a lie. But no, maybe there's one version of the hadith that specifically says 72 that is not a Sahih hadith, but the concept itself still stands in other hadiths and verses and so on. The concept of having a concubine in heaven of some sorts, or the Hur al-Ain. So beware of this sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily a tactic or a pitfall that people run into, which is you come across one version that is da'if or one version that is not trusted, and you think, therefore, this whole concept is false. No, that just might be one version that is not true. And there's a lot of repetition in these hadiths. There are, multiple versions of each hadith, and sometimes they're all graded sahih, or most of them are graded sahih, and they have different details, which is questionable. And sometimes, they'd have the same details, but one of them is not sahih and the other is sahih. So
Yeah.
anyway, you need to do some digging.
Yeah, a good way to look at it is one person hears something from the prophet and he's trustworthy, and he tells 10 other people. Two of them might not be trustworthy. So later on, 100 years later, when you look at the chain of narration, you might get the same hadith from two people. One of them is not trustworthy, and the other one is. So in that case, one of them would be Hasan, and the other one would be Sahih, for example.
Right.
So in that aspect, you got two different narrations, both saying the same words exactly, but one of them might be weak or abrogated or whatever. The other one would be accurate and correct.
Right. And a disclaimer before we begin reading the hadiths. The point of today is not to like pose ourselves as experts on anything. It's for you to, bring your attention to certain things, and you can go do your own research. You don't have to take our words for it, but these are things that you might want to take notice of, or that we took notice of at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's begin with, let's see, the first category of the hadiths that we have today, to get you to stop thinking. So you want to do the honors, Abu? Read this one.
I would love to. Okay, Bismillah. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يأتي الشيطان أحدكم فيقول من خلق ذلك من خلق كذا sorry من خلق كذا حتى يقول من خلق ربك فإذا بلغه فليستعذ بالله ولينتهي. Would you like to translate since
Yeah. Okay. So it's been reported that God's messenger said, the devil comes to one of you saying, who created this? Who created that? Even saying, who created your Lord? When he gets to that length, the man should seek refuge in God and stop thinking about it. So essentially, I guess this is tackling the question of who created God. Because, philosophers like to debate that God needs to exist to create everything. And the response to that is sometimes, well, you just created God to stop this infinite regress, but who created God? And I suppose Muhammad's way of addressing that is the man should just say, like, if someone asks you that question, just seek refuge in God and stop thinking.
Yeah. So this one is a fun topic because it's actually one of the things that I used to think of a lot growing up. And for reference, I grew up Muslim, and I just kept thinking of that question, like, if everything had a creator, if everything had a beginning, then what's the beginning of Allah? Then when I read other hadiths that looked like this one, it got me to say that that's not actually me. That's Satan speaking. That's not my thinking. That's not my logic, whatever that means. So whenever I had anything critical toward Islam, I would just shove to the side and say, that's not me. That's not my voice. There are voices in my head. Could be Iblis. Who knows? Just not me.
Right. And this way of just, stop thinking about it is not going to make it go away for a lot of people, like myself, at least. Just telling me not to think about it. It's like I'm telling you right now, don't think of a giraffe. What are you thinking of?
A giraffe.
Probably thinking of a giraffe. But this is even more serious than that because, it's life and death and eternal torture and eternal, reward, supposedly. So it's that strategy doesn't really work for me. So I wish he had a better answer than just stop thinking about it and pray harder. Like just ask Allah to, seek refuge in Allah, make the devil go away kind of thing.
And there's another version of this hadith, or maybe another instance where the Prophet has said the same thing, where he would say spit 3 times to your left. Could actually be real, like spit, or just motioning spit as a motion to tell Iblis off, to tell him, get out of my head.
Right. There's a lot of that. These things that supposedly shouldn't physically actually hurt Iblis or anything, but it's somewhat symbolic. Like you're supposed to look to the side and spit 3 times, or just pretend to spit, and somehow that's going to do something to Iblis.
Yeah. It's more of a shock factor to Iblis.
Yeah. I think if anything, it's more like conditioning people to behave a certain way and more performative,
Mhm.
you feel like you're doing something. But yeah, moving on. Uh, oh wait, I'm missing a slide. Did the
Oh,
slides move around? Oops. Something is broken with the file, guys. Give me a second. I'll add it again. Anyway, we were saying that this could make you think that this is the devil. I think there's a hadith right now that explicitly says that this is the devil. And I made a whole video about that, which I'm going to put a timestamp, or I'm going to put a link to in this timestamp, about how thinking that the devil is behind your critical thoughts could lead you, ironically, to more Islamic extremism, or could lead you to distrust yourself, or just distrust your judgment. What is real? What is not real? So make sure to watch that next. Right, give me a second. Just putting the slides on the screen. Okay, so we've been through this one. Here's a second one. It's a similar one. It says, if someone has the shaitan come up to them and say, who created you? And then you say Allah. And then the person says, who created Allah? If that happens to you, say, I believe in Allah and his messengers. And if that, and that will make the shaitan go away. Does shaitan here literally mean shaitan as in, the unseen devil? Or is it like a person acting as a shaitan? Or could it be both?
so since it didn't specify, it could be either. And
Mhm.
good points. I never thought about it that way.
Right. It could mean that, if you're having a conversation with me and you ask me these questions, I view you as the devil or an agent of the devil or being whispered to by the devil. Or maybe they actually think if this thought pops in your head, that is the devil making you question that. And
So
when you say, I believe in God and his messengers, that's going to make the devil go away. That
yeah, I
hasn't worked
don't
for
know
me.
the exact. I don't know the exact translation of the word shaitan, but
Mhm.
the Islamic opinion is that there's human shaitans and there's demonic shaitans, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
And the point of a shaitan is they're trying to get you out of heaven and into hell. So you would be considered a shaitan, so would I, by a Muslim. So
Right.
yeah, we could be the ones in that hadith right now.
Right. Shaitan is it literally means the shaitan, the Satan, but it's such a versatile concept that I'm still unclear about, was there first one devil and then they made more, or are these jinn
Yeah,
acting as devils, or are they humans acting on behalf of devils? It's all very confusing and elastic. Point is, it
yeah. There's
doesn't. Yeah, go ahead.
our apologies. There's always been shayateen in the universe, but there isn't really a clear time line of when they started existing. But even before the creation of Adam, there's always been jinn
Mhm.
that were bad or good. It's
Yeah,
just the concept that Iblis or Satan himself, the lord of the shayateen, uh, was like the most. I guess he was the villain of the story. But
right.
in the Quran itself, there's shayateen al-ins wal jinn, as in the shaitans of the people or of the humans and of the um, you know
Jinn.
demons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and jinn aren't explicitly demons. They're like this, like shadow people in a different realm, sort of thing.
yeah,
Yeah. Which is, people think that this is some kind of fringe belief maybe in Islam. It isn't. This is every Muslim is supposed to believe that jinn are a thing, that devils are a thing, and that jinn exist all around us all the time. But anyway, back to the hadiths.
yes,
um, the fate of disbelievers. Here are a couple of hadiths about the fate of disbelievers, because we often hear from apologists that, even good people can go to heaven. That's not really the position that you're told when you're growing up in Islam. No one really says you're free to follow Islam or not follow it. You're going to go to heaven if you're a good person. Nobody says that to us. It's only when facing outside criticism and someone asks, wait a second, how about all these people who aren't Muslim? Are they going to hell? Then you start hearing apologetic opinions about how, but there's this lady who fed a cat and she was a prostitute and she's going to heaven for it. And there's all this apologetic stuff about how you just need to be a good person and have good intentions. But then Muhammad explicitly says the opposite of that.
yeah.
So
There's a lot of
let's,
that.
yeah, there's a lot more that than there is the whole kumbaya, just be a good person version. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
let's read this one.
Okay. عن
You want to
أبي
go? Yeah, you
yeah.
don't have to read the just
Okay,
just go
yeah,
for it.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah,
والذي نفس محمد بيده لا يسمع بي أحد. I think it's misspelled actually. Is this a screenshot from the
probably, yeah.
yeah. أحد من هذه الأمة يهودي ولا نصراني ثم يموت ولم يؤمن بالذي أرسلت به as in Quran إلا كان من أصحاب النار.
Right. So Muhammad said, by him whose hand Muhammad's soul is in. So he's talking sort of in almost in the third person. By Allah is what he's saying. I swear by Allah, anyone of this people, Jewish or Christian, who hears me and then dies without believing in my message will be among those who go to hell. Now, we also hear a lot that people of the book, as in people who are Christians or Jews, have a shot at going to heaven as long as they follow their religions to as best as they could. Because Muhammad sometimes did say that. You know, Muhammad was kind of inconsistent, even in the Quran, about should they follow, should they not follow. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was after, returning to Mecca again that he started being more strict about it and saying, no, everyone needs to follow Islam now.
Yeah.
Um,
When they got stronger, basically.
yeah, when he had the military might, then as that verse says, يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا. Suddenly people entered Islam in droves, not because they were all convinced all of a sudden, but because the Muslims had more swords or more military might in that scenario. So
Yeah.
point of this hadith is anyone of this people, Jewish or Christian, who hears me and then dies without believing my message will be amongst those going to hell. I can see an apologist saying, well, maybe he was talking about the people present then, not about the rest of, Judaism and Christianity followers till now. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I just couldn't stop thinking about all the people that have told me that it's a bunch of steps that we have to go through every time I come out to someone as an ex-Muslim. The first step would be like, maybe you're not an ex-Muslim, maybe you're just questioning now. When we get over that one, I say no, I'm not. They say maybe you'll come back one day. And when we get that over with, they go for to this route. Like maybe you'll go to heaven anyway because you're a good person. You care about people. You care about goodness, and you're not a bad person. You're not evil. So maybe you'll go to heaven. And I always remember this hadith. It's a great time.
Right. And again, it would be nice if Islam was consistently just about being a good person and then you'll go to heaven. But the different versions or the different faces come out depending on the context. So you're never told as a believer, it's okay. You don't have to follow if you don't want to. Just be a good person. But it only comes out when you want to highlight the problematic nature of Islam and other religions too, where God is essentially so tiny minded and petty that knowing that a lot of people will die as followers of other religions or not believing in Islam at all, still somehow blames them for it, even though he saw it coming and he sort of predestined it to happen. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're going to hell. Next hadith.
Okay. Wait, let me skip through. Okay. I guess I have to start from the beginning here. جاء أعرابي إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله إن أبي كان يصل الرحم وكان as in he كان يفعل الخير for the Arabic speakers. فأين هو؟ قال في النار. قال فكأنه وجد من ذلك فقال يا رسول الله فأين أبوك؟ قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم حيثما مررت بقبر مشرك فبشره بالنار. قال فأسلم الأعرابي بعد وقال لقد كلفني رسول الله تعبا ما مررت بقبر كافر إلا بشرته بالنار.
Right. I think for the next one, we'll start reading it. You read a line in Arabic, I'll translate it in English,
That
and
would
then
make more
we'll do that.
sense.
So yeah, an Arabi, a man came to the Prophet and said, my father used to yasal rahim, so he used to have good relations with his family members. Where is he now? His father's dead. And Muhammad said, he's in hell. And قال فكأنه وجد من ذلك it's
استنكره.
okay. Right. So then So then the guy said to Muhammad, "What about your father? Where's your father?" And Muhammad said, "Every time you," Muhammad said, in hell, and every time you pass by the grave of someone who's a polytheist, a mushrik, um, then how do you say bashirhu? Like congratulate them
I guess
of
so, yeah.
going to hell. Yeah, like just kind of rub it in their
Break the
face
good
that,
news,
yeah, break the good news. Like, hey, you're going to hell, by the way.
which is
Which
ironic.
it is so ironic, and also um it doesn't really mean anything because I mean, in a literal sense, it doesn't, because the person who's dead can't hear you, right?
Yeah.
Like even if we believe in religion and everything, um, the person isn't literally sitting and listening to people talking over their grave. So I think it's more for the other believers and for
Mm,
themselves to remind each other this is what happens to the bad person. So every time you pass by, you're like, I don't want my fate to be like that. Um,
yeah.
but that is,
There,
yeah.
sorry, there is an opinion that dead people can hear the living, but that would not make it better, since
Mhm.
they're in the middle of what I would assume adab al-qabr, as in the torture of the grave. Uh, like an extra factor of torture isn't really doing anyone any favors. So I just don't see the point of it either way, even if they were able to hear it.
Yeah, and it's such a smug position too. Like, especially he's talking about his father, for example, the Arabi. I'm assuming his father died before Muhammad, right? Or
Yes, he did.
maybe that's not safe to assume, but yeah, assuming he died before Muhammad,
Yeah.
the guy didn't even know about Muhammad, and somehow he deserves to be not only going to hell, but be reminded of it every time someone passes by their grave.
Yeah.
Um, why though? Like, why is God and his followers, why are they so petty, and why are they happy about other people being tortured because they were wrong, if Islam is true?
Yeah. I get again, as the commenter just said just now on the screen, it's a scare tactic to keep you in the cult, and it's been working for every cult that we've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Scare tactics do work, and very clearly did for 1400 years. So can't fault the system.
Yeah. I mean, even today, imagine passing by a prison and telling everyone inside, "Hey, your life sucks. You're going to be in there for the rest of your life." Um, it's not really productive. Maybe it's cathartic for you if you know for a fact those are bad people and you think they deserve it and
Yeah.
so on. But it's not really productive. And the crime of not believing in this one religion, in my opinion, and honestly, even objectively, for a God that knows everything that's going to happen, that decided everything that's going to happen, it doesn't seem like a crime that deserves eternal torture and rubbing it in people's face till that
Yeah.
happens. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it's a, what do you call it? It's a limited and it's a limited amount of time worth of sins,
Mhm.
where it's an eternity of torture, which just does not equate. For all
Right.
my math lovers in the chat, I don't think 70 years of sin equals an eternity of torture. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Like this commenter points out about God being petty. When I was doing my umrah, I got my period, and because I made a mistake in quotes, I had to slaughter a goat, poor goat.
Poor
So
girl.
to make up for her uncleansiness, or her state of filth, and not being able to complete the umrah, she has to slaughter a goat and give the meat to people, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's
that
terrible.
yeah. So and the title here, lakum dinukum hu. So there's a verse that goes lakum dinukum waliya din, right?
Surah
لا أعبد ما
Al-Kafirun.
تعبدون. Yeah, Surah Al-Kafirun, the verse, the chapter of disbelievers. In it, God supposedly says to Muhammad, say to people, um, I don't worship what you worship. You don't worship what I worship. You have your religion. I have mine. Lakum dinukum waliya din. And the peace-loving Muslims or apologetics are usually pointing to that to say, look, Islam never forces anyone into anything, right? Even in the Quran, it says lakum dinukum waliya din, when the actions are obviously very different. And also, maybe we could take it to mean you made your bed, you're going to go to hell. That's up to you, kind of thing.
Yeah,
But it's not. Oh, I respect that you don't agree with me, and I don't think you deserve to be tortured for it. That's not what lakum dinukum waliya din means.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Um,
maybe. Yeah.
it's uh, it's just like it would be so adorable for a Muslim to just believe in that. Like lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your religion, I have mine. Let's just coexist in this world together and try to build a society that's cohesive and we can live together.
Mhm.
But yeah, as you said, when Islam got stronger and the army got stronger, just stopped being the case. I can see Islam being that in the beginnings, like more peaceful, more forgiving, because it couldn't help not being that. But then, as soon as people got the chance, nobody really thought that way anymore.
Mhm. I agree. I uh, Leporest Barry says it's like a blackmailer saying you have free choice, but the gun is right here to your head. And Amon Ross, thank you so much for the super chat. That's so generous of you. Says great to see Arabic speakers talking about this. Keep the work up. Thank you so much. And last comment I want to take before going to the next hadith. Jesus is King says, how can someone stay in this cult? The same way that they stay in other cults and religions. A lot of people don't know all the details about the religion. And when they do come across it, it's not as easy as looking at one thing and thinking, this doesn't make sense, I'm going to leave. There's a lot more attachment to it than that. It's easier to convince yourself that this must have a meaning that I don't know, or I'm going to leave the thinking to the scholars, or like the previous hadith was telling us, this is the devil. That's the devil's tactic, is to try to make this look suspicious or bad. So it's just like every religion has ways of keeping people in despite seeing the flaws in it, just like in Christianity as well. Homo sapiens says, would be great if you put the hadith references in the description. I'll put all the links in the description afterwards, but if you need to, the numbers are on the screen as well, so you can look them up yourself. But I know for the Arabic ones, it's harder too, but I'll leave the links anyway.
Yeah, we
All
haven't
right.
talked about al-masadir, sahih.
The sources, yeah.
Yeah, so most of them are, sorry, all of them are sahih, and sahih has different, I guess, authors of the books, like many hundreds years ago. Different scholars have written books, I guess, grading the hadith. And if you can see al-masdar, if you're an Arabic speaker, that's referring to the scholar that graded the hadith. So in this case, it is, where is it?
العواصم ولا
Yeah,
والقواصم.
Muslim, على شرط Muslim.
Right.
So yeah, isnaduhu Muslim, yeah, in this case, which is one of the main graders, I'd say.
Yeah. This one's Sahih al-Albani.
Yes.
Sahih Ibn Majah. Sahih Dar es-Salam. Okay, moving on to the next hadith. So you go ahead to read the Arabic. I'll read the English.
Let's see. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم سمع صوتا من قبر فقال متى مات هذا؟
Wait. Muhammad heard a sound from a grave, and then he said, when did this guy die?
Yeah. قالوا مات في الجاهلية.
They said he died before, like in the days of Jahiliyyah, which are, it's such like a PR for Islam name. The days of ignorance is what they call the days before Islam, because supposedly everyone was killing their own infants, and things were bad. Things were really bad, according to the Islamic narrative. But yeah, they say he died during the days of Jahiliyyah before Islam.
فسر بذلك وقال لولا أن تدافنوا لدعوت الله أن يسمعكم عذاب القبر.
So Muhammad was delighted by that, by hearing that this guy died during Jahiliyyah, and he said, were it not that you would bury one another, I would have prayed to Allah to make you hear the torment of the grave. I struggle to understand what he meant by that, to be honest.
So apparently people in the torture of the grave are screaming for their lives, even though they're dead. Ironic, but it is what it is. And it's, again, another scare tactic. These people are screaming and I can hear them, and you're lucky that you can't hear them. Again, another scare tactic.
Something that I noticed is common is when he says لولا أن something. If not for this, then that would have happened. And that's kind of a recurring theme. Like there's that story of Hajar, Ibrahim's the mother of his child, when when her kid, correct me if I'm getting the details wrong, but
Yeah.
her kid kept moving his feet because he was so thirsty. That was Ismail, right? Um,
Um, wait. Could you say that again?
Hajar,
Yeah.
Ibrahim's not wife,
Yes.
is his mother of his child. I don't know if she became his wife
Yeah.
later. Yeah,
She was his wife.
right. But she wasn't his first wife,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
She was his
Yeah.
wife to have a child with. Um,
Yeah.
Ibrahim left her and the kid in the desert,
Yeah.
and they were so thirsty, and Hajar kept walking back and forth, and that's why we do the
Yes.
Safa
Exactly. Yeah.
wal Marwa, right?
That is
Um,
correct. Yeah.
and anyway, that's why we do the ritual to this very day, walking back and forth between two hills. And
Yeah.
the kid was so thirsty, kept crying and moving its feet and hitting the ground till a well formed, or a spring formed. And there was a hadith, well, I don't have the reference right now, but Muhammad said something along the lines of, if it wasn't for Hajar
Hmm.
making a boundary for that well, it would have been one of the rivers or something of
Yes.
so there's
Precisely.
always
Yeah.
this, if not for this, that would have happened, but there's no
Yeah.
proof that any of that actually happened.
Yeah.
But I keep seeing that theme often.
It's
But
like
anyway,
when Jibril
mm,
came down from the sky, from the heavens, and asked, because the kuffar were bothering Muhammad. So he asked, "Would you like me to, uh, what's the word? I guess clap those two mountains, for lack of a
mhm,
better words, as per the translation. Basically, close two mountains on them. Could you help me translate, please?
uh, like smash the two mountains together
Yes,
with them in
thank you.
between,
Yeah,
sandwich
yes,
them.
and yeah,
Yeah,
sandwich them. Thank you. That is the
yeah,
scholar word. And he said, "No, I would not like to do that." So it's again another form of Lola.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mirth, for quoting the hadith. It's on the screen right now. If had she not hastened to collect the water, the Zamzam well would have become a flowing river. Um, about that, before we move on to the next hadith, so Zamzam is supposedly an endless supply of water, which is actually not true. It's a well that is filled by rains from the region. You know, it's a desert, but there's still rain. It's not an endless supply, and the Saudi government does know that. But if it was, I remember asking that question as a child. Um, if it is an endless supply, how come we're not shipping the water or creating pipes, to ship the water everywhere in the Middle East, or even just in Saudi Arabia? It could be an oasis. Just because it's a well doesn't mean that it can't become a river if it's endless. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like what's the limitation here? What did she do to limit the water if the water source is infinite? It makes absolutely no sense. Um, but yeah, Muhammad just said Lola this, then that. It's her fault.
Minecraft logic. You have two waters next to each
Yeah.
other.
Or it's kind of like when I used to ask this as a kid. So if Adam and Hawa hadn't eaten from that tree, then we would have all been in heaven right now. And I was told
That is
yes.
true.
But yeah,
Yeah,
none of that is really
sadly.
true. Yeah. Okay, moving on to the next hadith.
Yes.
Is that the one? Yeah, that's so. This category is the unfairness of Islam.
Mhm.
Let's go. So
Um,
this one's also just Arabic. It's a
yeah,
short one. الشمس والقمر يكوران يوم القيامة.
yeah,
So
and that's
what
pretty
does
much
that
it.
really mean? Yeah.
So, mukawaran, as in they will be tortured in hell for the sins. That is the translation or the explanation of the scholars. That is not mine. So please look
Mhm.
into it, because I agree that it doesn't make sense. Like, why would you torture the sun and the moon? But apparently, that's what it means. They
But
will
what
be
does it
tortured.
yukawarani mean? Because
Yukawaran.
some people take it to mean like make into a sphere or make
Oh,
into
no, no, no.
a ball,
Yeah,
and they say that there are other, yukawiru laylo nahar, for example,
yeah.
is a verse that says yukawiru laylo nahar. Some people point to that as a
Yukawarana.
miracle, and they
Yeah.
say, well, the orbits are kind of circular, so therefore Allah called it. No, I think it's more like folded, right? Like folds
Yes.
the night and day onto each
Exactly.
other.
Matwiyan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in this
Uh,
case, like folds the sun, which is already a sphere, but the
yes.
sun and the moon
Yukawaran.
somehow folds them into themselves.
So
And what does the explanation say, the Arabic
this
explanation?
is by al-Bukhari. So if you believe in any hadith, you probably believe in al-Bukhari. So this is his. These are his words. مطويان قد ذهب ضوءهما وقيل يلفان ويجمعان أو يجمعان
So their
ثم
light is
يلقيان
taken
في
away.
النار.
Their light is taken away. But by the way, the moon has no light in and of itself, but its
Yes.
reflected light is taken away.
ثم يلقيان في النار.
So yeah, and then they're thrown in hell.
Yes. وفي هذا تبكيت لمن كان يعبدهما في الدنيا ليعلموا أن عبادتهم لها كانت باطلة.
So this is what's the tabkit like?
So it's
hard to translate
just
that
like a
word.
reminder, I guess, like a
So
like
that's a
symbol.
reminder for those who used to worship them in on earth to know that their worship was for nothing. It was
Yes.
faulty. That was false. Which is funny, by the way. It's ironic because yes, in Islam you don't worship the sun or the moon, but you do take it into account for the times that you pray and the days that you fast and all these things. So it's like borrowing the concept of observing these figures and doing something with it from, I'm assuming, these Zoroastrians before them, or sort of like borrowing the concept of pilgrimage, Hajj, or tawaf, walking around the Kaaba, which the what's it called, the polytheists used to do before Islam, but pointing to them and saying when they do it, it's bad because they're actually worshiping the sun or the idols or the Kaaba instead of it being symbolic or something. But it's still symbolic when other people do it too. But somehow, according to this explanation of the hadith by Bukhari, which, like you said, Bukhari is one of the main sources of hadith and hadith explanations, and by extension also, Quran explanation.
He is
I'd
the
assume
guy,
he's the guy.
the plug.
So if you think Bukhari is speaking nonsense, that's okay, but that's also a reminder that most of the religion that people think was communicated, from God to us, is actually through the interpretation of men that used to think silly things like that. Like that God would torture the sun and the moon. So the sun and the moon are inanimate. So God would give them a personality or a soul, or I guess they already do have that, because because they like you said, yeah, Yusabihan, they pray to God supposedly, and also the Shamsu, what was it? تستقر تحت عرش الرحمن, right? The sun goes under God's throne, metaphysically, supposedly.
وكل ما في الكون يسبح بحمد الله.
Right. Everything in the universe prays to Allah. So, but somehow God's going to torture them, even though it's not their fault. I don't think the sun or the moon ever enticed anyone into worshiping them. But it does, I guess, show you a little bit about the simplicity or the simple-mindedness or the flawed ideas that they had about justice and punishment and fear. So maybe this is supposed to make people feel afraid that your fate is also going to be like the sun and the moon that you worshipped that can, do nothing for you now, kind of thing. I don't know, but it's a weird hadith.
So you also made a great point earlier that they help us pray, or at least Muslims. So they should be rewarded for that. Why is the focus on torture? Why is it always negative? Why can't they be taken to heaven, since the Muslims are what matter in the end?
Right.
So they should be taken to heaven, and we all sit around the sun just thanking it for helping us pray on time every day, but it just doesn't happen. It's always
or
negative.
We don't even have to thank it for anything. It could just take a break, exist in heaven now. But instead it'll be tortured. And to answer Mirth, yes, there was disagreement about the meanings of most things in Islam since even like the times right around the Prophet's life. After the Prophet died, there was still disagreement. So it's not a new thing.
Yeah.
Also,
I think we should continue the hadith. We didn't finish it.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah. وقيل إنهما خلقا من النار فأعيدا فيها. So
it was said by some scholars or by some opinions that they were created, the moon and the sun were created from fire, kind of like how the devil was created from fire, right?
Yes.
So now they return to the fire. Yeah.
Yeah. ولكن لا يلزم من جعلها في النار تعذيبهما, which then I don't get the point of taking it to
and
hell.
So that opinion would say that them reuniting with with hell or with the fire is not going to torture them, or
Yeah.
that's not the point of it?
فإن الله خلق للنار ملائكة لتكون عذابا لأهل النار.
Mhm. So God created
Angels.
for hell angels to be عذابا لأهل النار. Wait, for the angels to be torture for the residents of hell?
I am on the same boat. I do not get that part.
I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, it's worth looking into, but I doubt it is understood.
I mean, is it really worth looking into though? Because that's that's a point that I want to make.
We've heard enough.
Yeah. When people say, scholars of religion, or in Arabic, ulama ad-din, right?
Mhm.
Alim is the same word which means scientist. But
Yeah.
obviously, in this case, that's not a scientist, and I don't respect the work of a scholar of religion, not in general, but I mean, in some of these scholars, the work that they do is just sifting through a bunch of things that sound similar and trying to find, whose opinion about this and whose opinion about that, and things that eventually don't actually make a meaningful or good difference to people's lives. So
Yeah.
someone can dedicate their entire life to studying, being a scholar of Islam, but that's not the same way as like going the academic route and being a scholar at a university,
Yeah.
because again, all they're looking into is fatwas and opinions of other sheikhs and so on. So no, it's not worth your time to find that one detail. But it ends by saying in this hadith is ithbatu qudratillah. So it means proof, but I don't think that's what it means in this context. Is asserting God's ability, his ability to create and his ability to end, and
Mm.
all of his creations. All of the creations are submissive to Allah. That's what that says.
Yes.
Oh, and this is the English translation
Oh,
that I should have put on screen earlier.
would have made it easier.
Yep, I forgot about that.
That's
Well, I'll
good.
keep it on screen for a second while I read Hassan Adwan's comment here. Hassan, thank you for being here. Hassan says, torture is a theme. Sulaiman said, he would torture the hudhud bird if it didn't have a good excuse for its absence when he had a parade of animals and jinn. I remember that story. So Sulaiman was known for speaking to, or having the ability to speak to animals and jinn and so on. And one day he summoned all of them, and the hudhud was late, and asked the other animals, "Where's the hudhud?" As if there's only one hudhud, by the way, which is crazy when you think about it. Like if you're in a forest or whatever in the wild,
Yeah,
there's multiples of everything. What do you mean you just got one? It's
and I
obviously
think
a fake story.
this is going to be interesting when we get to the funny hadith. This
Right.
is sort of a
I'm not sure
foreshadowing.
if I included that one actually, but
Oh,
we'll see. Yeah, but at least we
well,
know Sulaiman used to
yeah,
speak to animals or
yeah,
understood animals, and that's how you know that the story is really mythical, because again, silly little details like why is there one of each animal?
yeah,
So the one hudhud that was absent, Sulaiman said he better have a good excuse, or it better have a good excuse, otherwise I will torture it. Why are you torturing an animal for not being summoned on your will? Like yeah, it's a
and it's
theme.
also an opinion that we humans can be tortured because we have free will, unlike animals. You always hear that. Unlike animals, we're not animals.
Right.
Uh, okay, but when you are an animal, you could get tortured for not, I guess, submitting,
Mhm.
to the will of Sulaiman.
Right, not even Allah,
Yeah,
for
not even
not being
Allah.
summoned by Sulaiman quick enough. And that's as Hassan says, that's Quran, that's not Hadith. So it's not even like,
Yeah,
oh, I don't believe that Muhammad said that. No, Allah supposedly said that. Like it's canon. It's really heavily canon.
and Islamically, we have the free will and animals don't. So
Right.
it's not even their will to not submit. So that's funny.
And we could talk about this for hours and hours. And this is a recurring theme in Islam, at the very least. I'm sure it's also a problem in other religions, that if you start looking too closely at the details, you'll find it that it's kind of contradicting other concepts. Like you said, humans have free will, supposedly, therefore, that's why they deserve to be tortured if they don't do the right thing. But the animal doesn't. But for a second, for the sake of the story, the author or authors didn't take that into account.
Yeah,
So they kind of made the animal into some sort of human, kind of elevated its personality to a human almost, or some
yeah.
jinn or something like that. Um, anyway, yeah, interesting stuff.
Okay.
This one,
Uh,
my wife who says "be nice or else." You'll see why I titled it that
I love
way.
the title. Now do the male who
Right.
wait who
We'll get to that in a second. So
yeah.
this is from sometimes the titles of the hadith or the chapter is kind of funny, or really interesting to look at. These were kind of benign so far. Al-waswasa, this is about the devil. This is about faith. Fasl awal, this is the punishment of the grave. But today, this hadith right here, the chapter, a woman who annoys her husband. That is a chapter in the marriage chapter, a subsection of the marriage chapter. Um, so I don't think there's a chapter ever of the man who annoys his wife or
Never.
the man who hurts his wife or anything like that. Obviously, Muhammad was a bro's bro, so he was just looking out for the bros.
Yeah.
Um, by the way, like, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a live chat, all that good stuff. It really helps the channel grow and helps other people find content like these. Thanks, Jerwalk, for the reminder. So anyway, yeah, the woman who annoys her husband. Go ahead,
Yeah.
please.
لا تؤذي لا تؤذي امرأة زوجها إلا قالت زوجته من الحور العين.
Okay, so a wife does not annoy her husband except for a wife of his among the Hur al-Ain, which are the heavenly sex maidens that are promised to men in heaven.
لا تؤذيه قاتلك الله فإنما هو عندك دخيل أوشك أن يفارقك إلينا.
Right. She says, so supposedly, in a way that the real wife can't even hear, the wife from heaven says to the real wife, I guess symbolically, that do not annoy him or do not bother him. May Allah destroy you, for he is just a temporary guest with you, and soon he will leave you and join us. I don't understand
That's
how this is even supposed to achieve anything productive. Like, what's the point?
productivity. No, maybe comfort, maybe control, maybe
Of course.
control over
Yeah.
the other gen. But yeah, I just can't see it. Yeah, as you
But
said.
let's say all of it is actually real. Okay, let's say that Hur al-Ain do exist, right? Um and they do tell the woman that, or even symbolically say that to the woman. What is that supposed to do to the woman? So she already knows that she lost, right? Like
Yeah,
he's only with her temporarily, and soon he'll be screwing Hur al-Ain in heaven for the rest of eternity. And there's
lucky
nothing the
guy.
wife could do about it. You already lost. Whether you're a good wife or a bad wife
Yeah.
had nothing to do with it. You
So
could be,
it's sort of
yeah.
apologies.
No.
Yeah, it sort of sounds like when he asked your single friend who's always been single for relationship advice. He's not going to give you great advice, but it's probably going to be wild, you know?
Yeah.
So it sounds like his friends were complaining about their wives not submitting, not being submissive enough for to their liking. So he made up this story about the 72 virgins actually, I guess, praying for her downfall, praying
Mhm.
for her demise. So it's kind of funny in that perspective.
I mean, but what is this supposed to achieve? Like, again, because this applies to whether the woman is a good wife or a bad wife or annoying or naggy or not naggy. This is the reality that she's going to have to face if Islam is true when they go to heaven. That her husband gets to sleep with as many Hur al-Ain as he wants, which, by the way, the description is from the Quran. This is not a hadith only problem. Hur al-Ain is a concept in the Quran itself, and they're described to be so pale that they're almost translucent, that you can sort of see the bones,
The veins.
the veins, sorry. And I think that is very indicative. Like, the simplest explanation and the most realistic one is that in the desert there aren't a lot of very pale people in that region because of the sun, obviously, and the ethnic makeup of the people. So that is the exotic thing. Muhammad was into white girls. That's the concept here. And so then he was tempting people with something that they're into that is very exotic, which is, in heaven you're going to have these very pale girlfriends that aren't actually human. Like, they weren't real souls that were teleported to heaven, but God created them for that purpose. And somehow God is going to make it all okay for the woman. Like, when a woman asked, so what about me? Isn't this unfair to me? I think some of the explanations were that you're going to be so pretty in heaven that you're not going to be jealous of the hur. So what,
Mm.
like, you're supposed to not be jealous of your husband's side chicks because they're not as pretty as you? Like you should
And
be okay
that's
with that.
really shallow. Yeah, it's really
Yeah,
shallow to think that their jealousy is only due to being, I guess, uglier than the other chick.
yeah,
Like, it's not the case. You love somebody. It's a love relationship. It's not
yeah.
just a marriage. Just never accounts for that. It's never just about love. It's about, beauty, power, money.
Mhm. And can you imagine flipping the script on that? So explicitly, there is no such thing as the same thing for women, right? But
Mhm.
some progressive Muslims, or let's say Muslims who are reaching and really trying to make Islam seem like not a misogynistic religion, would say, well, you can get whatever you want. So under that umbrella, then a woman can wish for,
Yeah.
sexy hurulain for her, men
Yeah.
or men, not women, because gayness is haram. And of course, most Muslims would crucify a woman for ever daring to say that. But let's imagine it for a second. Imagine going to a Muslim man and saying, "Hey, so I'm going to go screw your wife, and it's okay because I'm not as handsome as you are. Don't worry, you're still more handsome than I am." Like, is that supposed to make up for it?
Terrible, terrible.
And
Well,
yeah,
you can't expect much from a faith that names women ناقصات العقل والدين or ناقصات عقل ودين. So
right.
it really doesn't talk about them because that's their perspective on women. And feel free to translate.
Yeah, women are deficient in mind and in religion, and that's another hadith. Maybe I'll include it in the next compilation. If you want more of these, let me know. But it was a hadith where Muhammad was asked, "Why are women naqisatu aqlin wa din? Why do you say that they're limited in cognitive function or intelligence and in religion?" And he said, "Well, limited in cognitive functions or in intelligence. I don't know how to translate it one for
Yeah,
one, but naqisatu aqlin." Limited in your mind because Islam requires two women to equal the witness of one man.
yeah,
So because I said so, essentially, because Allah said we need two of
yeah.
you, that's the reasoning. It's
And why is
circular
it two? Because they're
because the naqsat aql.
yeah,
There you go.
exactly. Yeah,
Because they're deficient in their mind.
yeah,
It's a circle. And naqsatu deen, why are they deficient in their religion? Well, because they're not allowed to do certain things like prayer, fast, and so on when they're on their period. The way Allah created them, they're not allowed to pray during that time. And some Muslims would say, well, that's mercy for them because maybe they're suffering because of their period. But then at the same time, he's kind of throwing it back in their face and saying, well, you're deficient. You're not doing enough religiously, even though I said you shouldn't touch mushaf when you're on your period and things like that. So, yeah, Islam is truly the first feminist religion, as they say.
yeah.
But again, yeah, can you imagine a version of this for the other way around? If your husband, like, why didn't Muhammad say, if your husband is annoying you or being a bad person or
Yeah.
abusive, then just show him this hadith where a male from heaven who's like a sex god essentially, right? Chiseled abs, don't need to go into details about their equipment, but it all works very well. And you're like, is made to have intercourse, is definitely going to be good at it, is going to say to you, the real human man, yo, bro, be nice to her because once you're done, she's mine for the rest of eternity. Like you're just here for a short
Yeah.
time.
And
Would
don't forget
Muslims really?
the
Yeah.
da'wah. قاتلك الله.
قتلك. Oh yeah, tell us about that.
Well, it's not just jealousy from the Hur Ain, the maids of the heaven. It's also a prayer against the woman. She is, I guess, his wife from heaven is praying for the downfall of his wife in the first life, in life. So it's praying for Allah to destroy her. May Allah destroy you. Uh, I don't know. It sounds like a da'wah mustajaba, an answered prayer.
Right. It does seem like I guess, but let's think about it for a second. The prayer of a heavenly sex maiden, Hur Ain, why does that count for anything? So our prayers as humans may or may not come true. It's up to Allah to decide at the end of the day. But I guess they do count for something because we're human and we're going through this, test of life and so on. And we have this supposedly we signed this agreement with God that we will worship you, otherwise we'll be tortured and so on. But she was created allegedly just for the purpose of being an ornament in heaven to be used by the man. So why would Allah then listen to her? Like, does she
Well,
have a soul? Does she have a personality?
I believe so. I don't think there's any sources that claim that she does, but it feels like what makes sense is probably safe to assume that
Hmm.
that she's a full human. She is, as normal as can be.
Hmm.
So since she's only going to heaven, there's no chance she's going to hell. That means she's probably a good person. She's probably a Muslim. She believes in Allah. She's a good human being, a good soul. So I just don't see, because she does have feelings. She was jealous in this instance.
Right.
Instance. So since there are feelings, and since she is created by Allah to stay in heaven, so she is Muslim and she is a good human being,
Mhm.
for all we care, then I don't see why her prayers wouldn't be answered.
So, in other words, God creates super, super duper good girls, and their reward or their fate is to be a man's sex toy for the rest of eternity in heaven.
Yes. In other words, yes.
Good to know. Um, yeah, totally a feminist religion.
Yep.
And again, like, to make this explicitly clear, we both on this call don't believe that this is true. We're not saying, oh, that's so unfair. Why did Allah create heavenly maidens for men and not for women? We're trying to show how obviously this was the imagination of human beings. Like, this is obviously the work of man, literally human man. Otherwise, God just happens to have a penis and think like men for some reason,
Yeah.
which makes no sense. Anyway, moving on to the next hadith. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, it's when you think about it, it's essentially my wife who says be nice or else. Like that's
Yeah.
that's the summary. My
Wouldn't change the
imaginary,
title.
yeah, it's my imaginary woman that I have feelings for or will be sleeping with says that you have to be nice to me. Anyway,
Great title.
AG says it makes sense if you fabricate Allah. Well, if you claim to speak to God, I guess it makes sense because that's not actually God. Next hadith. I don't think you're familiar with that one, so let me.
See, surprise.
Yeah, it's a new one. You didn't prepare that one, so I'll read the
That's
English one. We don't have to read the Arabic one this time. So
okay.
the chapter of a woman giving gifts to someone other than her husband. So there's a ruling. There's the way that these ulama think of everything is they need a ruling for everything. Allah, what do we do? How do we wipe our butts? How do we talk to our neighbors? How do we do this? How do you do that? So you have all these chapters of, so this is how a woman is supposed to deal with giving gifts to someone other than her husband, as if that needs to be a rule from God, but there's a rule there. So this chapter, right, woman giving gifts to someone other than her husband, the freed slave of Ibn Abbas that Ma'muna bint Harith told him that she manumitted a slave. Okay, this part is not really well translated, but Ma'muna bint Harith told Muhammad that she manumitted a slave girl, let free a slave girl, without taking permission of the Prophet. On the day when it was her turn to be with the Prophet, well, she told someone else. But on the day that she was supposed to be with the Prophet, because Muhammad had many wives and he gave each of them one day a week, by the way, which is another topic. Oh, where'd it go? 1 second. So she said, do you know, O Allah's Messenger, that I have let my slave girl free? He said, have you really? She replied in the affirmative. He said, man, he's a bad listener. You would have got more reward if you had given her, the slave girl, to one of your maternal uncles.
Wow.
So let's make that very clear. We hear a lot from Muslims or apologists and promoters of Islam that Islam is not pro-slavery. Islam came to end slavery, right? And that is so not true, because Islam put rules on slavery that allowed it and allowed buying slaves and taking slaves in war scenarios and trading slaves. So it's not just restricting the way that you can get a slave. Supposedly by the book, you can't just walk to a free person and take them as a slave. At least Islam, made that a rule. But you can wage war against their town, and if they don't join Islam, then you can start taking slaves. So effectively,
Yeah.
people still took slaves. And I want to make this video in the future. The slave trade, the Islamic slave trade, has continued for many, many years. There were millions of people who were enslaved because of at least empowered by Islam. Like it happened in other parts of the world too, and it happened for reasons that have nothing to do with Islam, but Islam did nothing to stop it. Okay, let's just make that very clear.
It's
But
not
there
wrong
are,
to fault every system that allows slavery.
yeah, and like no one's saying Islam is explicitly why slavery was a big problem, but Islam did nothing to stop it. Islam exacerbated, gave license for it to happen, and it only stopped in that part of the world in like the latest was the 1980s. So there are apologists, a lot of apologists who think, and a lot of Muslims who have this rosy idea about Islam, and they think, no, there's no way that Allah would encourage people owning other human beings. But Muhammad did it, and Muhammad's family did it, and he participated in wars where they took slaves. And there's so much details already that we know that it was a thing. And in this case, and there are a lot of ways in which you can free a slave to get points in Islam. Or if you don't do a certain thing, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are things, if you make a mistake, you free a slave for forgiveness, essentially, or you get extra points for freeing a slave. So the point, I guess, from a Muslim's perspective is that this was Allah's way of cutting down slavery or encouraging people to give away slaves or to set them free. But here we see at least one example where instead of Muhammad saying, "Oh, honey, that is great, that is excellent, I'm glad that you let that slave go," he said, "You would have gotten more points with God if you gave the slave as a gift to your family members."
Yeah, and it reminds me. The title reminds me of another slavery topic in Islam from the Quran itself, and there's a hadith that back it. We've all heard the ayah that says, sorry, give me a second.
Mhm.
What was it? The one that legalized having
Ma malakat
sex with a
aymanukum,
slave? Yes, exactly.
wa
Yeah,
ma
that's the
malakat
one.
aymanukum,
Yeah,
what your right hand possesses
exactly. Yeah,
is a term that is sound kind of vague, but what it means in Islam is what your
what
right
your
hand
right
possesses is the women
possesses.
that you own,
Yeah.
essentially.
So the context of that ayah is there were Sahaba, friends of the Prophet, that were not sure and not too keen on the idea of having sex with female slaves who were already married. So they went to the Prophet and asked, "Can we have sex with these married slaves as their husbands are still alive in their own town?" So the Prophet then got this revelation from Allah Himself, came down from Jibreel came down from the sky saying, "You can go
Mhm.
ahead," and so they did. But like,
Right.
if the Sahaba were not too keen on the idea of having sex with those slaves, then it seems like a great time to abolish slavery, or at least make it
Right.
stricter, to maybe abolish that aspect. But
Yeah.
that didn't happen. He just gave them the green light. Yes, you can absolutely go ahead and do that.
Right. And I mean, there's a Muslim who says, right hand possessors are not slaves. They are those who you have oaths with. Man, I'm telling you, we both speak Arabic. We both know firsthand accounts. This is not like some anti-Islam conspiracy. As Muslims, we're told right hand, what your right hand possesses is your slaves. It's as clear as day. Always has been. I don't know what you have oaths with mean. Like, what? How do you have an oath with a woman that you can have sex with? Because that was the context of the verse. Is who are you allowed to sleep with? Ma malakat aymanukum is one of the categories, or who are you allowed to kind of seek that relationship with. So if you just make an
What?
oath and have sex with someone, that's called having a relationship. That's dating. So Muhammad's
Yeah,
okay with dating,
and he did make the distinction between azwajukum wa ma
right?
malakat aymanukum. So
Your
there's
wives and
clearly
yeah,
yes. So he wouldn't say the same thing twice. So it must be two things at least. Like we can agree on that. There is definitely something beyond that. But the question seemed kind of anti-hadith because there's a lot of hadiths that speak about slavery. So yeah,
but even in the Quran, this is a concept. It's
absolutely.
not a hadith only thing. Um, and SL says, well, some people might object and say, why not free them and let them go? Okay, well, where'd they go? What would they do? What do you know about that time to make you think that it was the best solution for someone who has lost everything and is abandoned on a battlefield? So I have thoughts about that. I'll share my thoughts and then let you share yours. Um, who is the person who enslaved them or caused it to be a battlefield and took away their possessions? I mean, it's the Muslims, right? who have God on their side. So they are causing the problem, even if it's like some people say it's only defensive wars. No, there were a lot of offensive wars as well. Um, so they caused the problem. They ruin someone's city or town. And then the best solution is to take them as slaves. And not only that, but screw them again in an imbalanced power dynamic. If Muhammad had a connection with God, couldn't he just ask God, hey, how do I cause an economic revolution where I find a way to empower all those freed slaves who couldn't have been slaves to begin with if you didn't take them, or other slaves that I bought and I want to free? How do I create an ecosystem where they can be productive and make value for themselves and their community, instead of I need to sleep them in order to help them, sleep with them in order to help them? It doesn't make any sense. Like if you want to start a shelter for slaves and young girls and battered women, you don't have to sleep with them.
And clearly, we know that at least Muslims back then used to just show off how they had no poor people because of zakah or sadaqah, and nobody couldn't find any food to eat, even though we have evidence that the Prophet himself tied a rock to his stomach because of hunger. But we've heard that opinion a lot, that in a Muslim country there is nobody that is poor because of zakah and sadaqah. Then might as well just use that money to free the slave and give them, or not even slave, they wouldn't be enslaved to begin with to be slaves. Just give them enough to get by, either banish them to another land or give them some land or whatever, give them jobs. Just slavery is usually the last option, or not even an option. So yeah.
Hassan says they always say that he couldn't stop slavery immediately since it was integral to society, but polytheism was the income of Quraysh and much more important. Yet Allah had no problem stopping it immediately. That's a great point. Polytheism is shirk. Shirk is taking partners with Allah. So some might even argue that a version of polytheism that doesn't include Allah is worse than shirk, because shirk is the worst thing, which is having partners with Allah or praying to someone else but Allah. Alongside Allah. So God thinks that is the worst thing, that is the worst sin someone could ever commit, which is essentially his ego gets hurt when people pray to other things or other entities, even if those entities don't exist. If it's not the sun or the moon, or it's a fictional God that God, the real God, would know is fictional. But to him, it's more important to put a stop to that than it is to put a stop to owning and assaulting other human beings. Is that a good God?
It speaks multitudes, because you cannot hurt Allah as per his own words. So if he cannot be hurt, but humans can be, then might as well prioritize that to minimize suffering, unless that's not the main goal of Islam.
Yeah. And Awais says, if it weren't for you deconstructing hell, it would have been really tough. They also said that they left the religion. And thank you for letting me know. And I guess that's an answer for some people who might be watching us and listening to these hadiths and thinking, how could someone believe in something so silly or something so flawed? Well, hell is one of the main factors, is that fear that's been ingrained in them before they've even heard of these hadiths or before they've had a chance to really look at their religion. So it's more than just finding a silly hadith and realizing my religion's a sham. It's much deeper than that.
Yeah. And trust me, those are not the things that got, at least me, I won't speak for you, Aladdin, out of the religion. It's bigger pressing questions than that. But these are just the cherries on top. That honestly, the way we made this list of a hadith was just me going through a book, Al-Albani and Al-Bukhari. I was just going through them and I just found some interesting hadith to talk about. And my initial intention was just to read. So it is by no means the main reason why most people would leave.
And subhanallah, as they say, you were doing what Allah said, iqra. God said read, iqra. You were you weren't even reading a list of hadiths that are problematic that an ex-Muslim or a critic had listed for you. You were just reading from the source, and this is what you found there. And I'll speak for myself. When I was young, or when I was questioning religion from a very young age, I didn't know about most of this stuff. If I even heard about it, like the most problematic thing would have been, why can a man marry more than one woman? And I would see like the familiarity with it would be its depiction in drama, in media or something, like the jealousy between the wives, or a man who marries another woman behind his wife's back, and how Islamically it is allowed, but it's not a good guy thing to do. All of that never really made me have doubts. Even if I found the concept icky or problematic, I just thought there's something I'm missing. What matters is the truth. But I had other problems with like predestination and free will and God's idea of fairness and God's priorities and so on. So yeah, it's then you find all this stuff later on, at least for me. So if I had found some of this stuff back when I was a believer, I don't know if it would have helped me leave or would have shocked me into leaving. For some people it works, for others, unfortunately, not.
Mhm.
And thank you for the super chat. Late night Keiju says, "How awful is it to justify slavery by saying that it's for the best because the slave's family was wiped out by the slavers?" That's the irony of it, isn't it? Like when they say that they had no choice but to marry the widows of the women whose husbands they just killed. Like, really? Well, they had a choice not to kill them.
Stockholm syndrome before Stockholm.
Yeah, before. See, subhanallah, he figured out Stockholm
Subhanallah, he
syndrome
predicted.
first. Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Now the final hadiths that are just silly. Well, yeah. This, you want to read that one in English?
Yeah, sure. In English. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned to face us when he stood up to pray. Before he said takbir and said, "Make your rows straight and fill the gaps, for I can see you from behind my back."
Right.
أراكم من وراء ظهري. I love the Arabic version.
Right. So
yeah.
what do you find problematic about this?
So we are all of the opinion that the Prophet, or at least most of us, because that's the Islamic version narrative, that the Prophet did not have any gifts of his own. He did not have any miracles, and his miracle was the Quran. But apparently, he could see from behind his back, and this is not just one hadith that's out of context. That's what I thought when I the all-seeing Muhammad. Nice. That's what I thought when I first came across this hadith. But then I looked more into it recently, a couple months after I read that. Apparently, he was able to see from behind his back in that one instance. Not again, not ever again in his life, but just that one time when he was too lazy to turn back to see if they were standing, the right way. Which, by the way, does not matter. Who cares? But
Well,
Allah decided to
I'll
show
tell you
him.
why it matters. Okay, and this is a bit of a tangent, but why is Muhammad so, like, why does he count certain things and he insists on a certain count or on a certain order? Possibly because of OCD, possibly.
But then
I don't know.
But then I would turn around and check if I do have OCD. I think he does.
I mean,
He's like
but
sort of the
that's his
Muslim Raymond.
insistence on like the lines and everything, and qadam fil qadam wal katif fil katif and all that. Like, you need to have
And I see you behind my back.
yeah, I mean, maybe he was just too lazy to turn around, or to maybe keep them on their toes, to always think that Muhammad might be able to see them, so
You
might
know
as
what?
well line up
Could be.
properly.
Could be. It's like when you walk down the stairs in the dark and you say, "I know you're there," even though you know there's nobody there, but just in case. So it's like a tactic you would use just to make sure that if they weren't standing the right way, they would. But yeah, apparently the Islamic opinion is that he, in that one instance, was shown by Allah behind his back, and he was not even shocked. Like right now, if I could see behind my back, I would leave the skull. I would, I'd either be really happy or just really shocked and scared. But he was just like, yeah, just stand the right way because right now, as of right now, I can see you. And it just, I can't help but wonder why not during wars? Why not during any other more pressing time? Like could be somebody attacking from behind. Could be, as I said, during war. It's just way more important, way more critical to see behind your back without turning than a moment when you could just do that easily.
Right. And
Yeah.
I want to make this clear. Like, none of this really disproves Islam, because, again, Islam has never been proven to begin with. So it's not our task to try to convince you that it is false. But also, you can find an explanation for anything. Like, is it impossible for Allah to have given him that power in this one instance just for him to say that? No, it's not impossible. Is it impossible that Allah didn't give him a heads up when he died by poisoning? By a Jewish woman who, if I remember correctly, her family he had killed or something.
I'm
I don't quote me on that. I'll get to that in a future video. But Allah never gave him a heads up before he died that he was being poisoned. Maybe that's part of Allah's plan. Um,
Yeah.
but none of this is meant to say this is empirical evidence that Islam is not true, because none of this was used to prove it to begin with, and nothing could ever prove it really based on what we heard so far. This is just to get you to think, wow, this obviously sounds like someone making it up, or stories that are mythological in nature that aren't actually real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I did send you another hadith, and I think it would be like a minute read if you could see it after
Where did you send it?
On Discord.
I can't reach there right now.
Okay, you're good. You're good.
What
Okay.
is it about?
So let me read it real quick.
Mhm.
Just give me a second. It says, لو يعلم الذي يشرب وهو قائم ما في بطنه لاستقاء. As in, if an upright, standing person who is drinking, could be water or anything, knew what his stomach looked like while he was drinking, while standing, he would have thrown up. Which is just funny. Like, there's no context to it. There's no point to it. And we have X-rays nowadays. We have means to see what goes on in your stomach when you drink water while standing. And
Right.
this is Hadith Sahih. So yeah, it's just a funny
So
addition to
Muhammad
this.
really hated drinking while standing up. He had to sit down to drink, right?
Yes.
Which, again, I can't diagnose a man who I don't even have full accounts, and I'm not qualified to diagnose. But I'm telling you, that is a sign of possibly obsessive compulsive behavior, where like he has to do things a certain way, otherwise bad things might happen. We know that you can drink sitting down, you could drink standing up. It makes no difference. Like it's not really going to hurt you in any way. But
Yeah.
Muhammad didn't know that. And I wish, when he said something that was halfway wise, or something that seemed nice, or something that someone in the future might interpret as some kind of scientific miracle, Muslims think, wow, that's a sign he's from God. But when he says dumb shit, no one thinks, oh, therefore he's not a prophet. Like, you got to be consistent. You can't
Yeah.
be amazed by every little silly thing he does and ignore every, bad thing or every other silly thing he does.
Yeah. One of the darts is bound to stick if you throw enough.
Yeah. Let me read a couple comments before we get to the next chapter. What was it? Hadith?
Yeah.
Man, I can't think today. What was it? Oh yeah. This commenter says, I think he saw gaps in shadows that that reached him behind him. That would be the row of people. I mean, if there was a light source behind him, he could see, the light in between the gaps. That is a plausible explanation. I don't see why not. Wait, I wanted to point out a couple things. Yeah, Hassan Adwan. I remember a selfie guy pushing his foot so hard against mine until it hurt. So I moved away. So he pushed again, and it went on until he was doing the splits.
Yeah. I apologize. That might have been me. I used to do that. I'm not gonna lie.
So that's the al-qadam fil qadam wal katif fil katif and stuff. So the imam would tell you to, tightly pack with each other, which is not always a bad thing, because if there are people who can't fit in the mosque or can't fit on the prayer mat, then it's better to include them. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but it was annoying that some people would think it's so sunnah, it's so important that they'd have to have their foot touching your foot and their shoulder touching your shoulder, and I hated that so much.
Which, by the way, isn't really good, because as per the Islamic opinion, Sahaba used to fight for the Saf al-Awwal, for the first line, because apparently you get more cookie points that way. So they used to fight over it, like almost wrestle, but not, quite. So yeah, it makes sense why they used to put stick the toes to each other, because they tried to, I guess, squeeze into tighter spaces. But like the way it evolved is just crazy.
Yeah. And one more comment. Max says, we have reports of people asking Muhammad, where are your miracles? And he just points to the Quran. And then other reports basically say Muhammad farted out miracles with every meal. What do you think about that?
I would like to point to another miracle that we haven't talked about. 2 comments ago. He could not have seen the shadow, because he apparently can see in the dark. And I don't know about you, but like, seeing in the dark means he cannot see any shadows.
Wait,
I don't
he
know.
can see in the dark?
Apparently, don't quote me on that. But as I was looking through the eye on his back eye.
Mhm.
Apparently, he could see in the dark as well,
Yeah.
along with the Byakugan he has.
I mean, I don't think that negates that he can see shadows too, because what if he sees it as like an overlay of a different color or something? I don't know.
We'd have to run some experiments on it.
Yeah, we'd have to run some experiments on Muhammad's superpowers. Okay. Um, right. So this next one, when Muhammad went to, and this is a timestamp, I'm going to include a link to a previous video that I did about, it was an animated video and a very good one, if I might say so, about Muhammad's trip to go meet Allah on the Buraq. So Muhammad got on the Buraq, he went to Al-Quds or Masjid Al-Aqsa first, right? And
Yeah.
and then went to meet Allah. And this happened on that trip. So you want to tell us what's the relevant part here?
Yeah. So he sees a tree. Sorry, should I read the Arabic first?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. So he sees a tree, and that's Sidrat al-Muntaha, the tree, and it has a great significance in Islam. And its leaves are huge. They are that of like the same size of an elephant's ears. And he sees 4 rivers coming down from that tree. 2 of them, he asked Jibril, what are those? And he answered, 2 of them are from heaven, the heaven. But the other 2 that you can see are Al-Furat wa Nil, Euphrates, and the Nile. 2 rivers that are very close to where he is, and probably the closest 2 rivers to Muhammad. And it's just a big coincidence that was it Sidrat al-Muntaha?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's just a big coincidence that the 2 significant rivers to Islam are the 2 closest to his geological or geographical location. Could have been more important rivers, like the Amazon, which is probably the most important river on Earth.
I don't know if you can rank them, but it's truly one of the rivers of Earth.
One of the rivers.
Yeah. But so a few things to say about that. First of all, he knew of the Nile, and people there knew of the Nile, even though they weren't in Egypt, right? And why is that? Because of trade routes, because people talk. So something that Muslims kind of forget sometimes, whenever you tell them or whenever they say, this is a miracle, because how could Muhammad have known this or that? Like, for example, the description of how an embryo forms in the womb, which is, by the way, inaccurate and copied from essentially Greek ideas before Muhammad. A Muslim would say, well, how could Muhammad have known that? He didn't live anywhere near that. But obviously ideas travel and people travel and traders travel. And supposedly Muhammad was with his wife. His first wife was a trader. So Muhammad knew of the Nile, even though they're not in the same country, right? Or not in the same region, but close enough. But as you said, that what a coincidence it is that the rivers that are up in heaven or at Sidrat al-Muntaha are 2 rivers that are completely fictional, and 2 of them on Earth that have something to do with the region that he's in. That doesn't seem like he didn't even mention, and there were like 5 other major rivers that I didn't know the name of because they're not around me or something. Yeah. Like he didn't say that.
And it implies that the source is from Sidrat al-Muntaha, the tree of, I guess, the end's tree. But we know the sources. We study them, we teach them, we understand them fully.
Right. Like that's another question. Is that, Muslims could say that's a metaphysical source. It's not actually literally where the water comes from, but metaphysical is a word that could mean anything, it's just in the other world that we can't see, that is the source. But again, how come he just mentioned the rivers that are near him and not other rivers? But absolutely. Anyway, again, none of this really disproves anything, but it just shows you the very likely possibility that this was just a guy working with what he knew and human ideas.
Yeah.
This one.
FU would love. I love the titles. I love what you're doing.
I came up with these just minutes before the live stream, so I'm glad it's landing.
No, it's great. That's great.
The
Um,
chapter of whomever is cursed, reviled, or prayed against by the prophet when he does not deserve that, it will be purification, reward, and mercy for him.
mhm.
That is that's a long chapter name. That's not what it says in Arabic.
You know, Arabic,
Half of
three
that.
words in one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So should I read the Arabic version or should we skip through it?
We could skip it. I mean, people don't want to hear both all the time, but we can
Sure.
read the Arabic versions too. Um, yeah. So
Yeah.
Allah's messenger. Wait, where does the hadith start?
Yeah. So it
Aisha
starts
reported.
from there.
Yeah. Aisha
Allah's messenger.
reported that two people visited Muhammad, and both of them talked about a thing of which I am not aware, Aisha says. But that annoyed him, and he invoked curse upon both of them and hurled malediction. English is
Malediction.
not my first language either.
Malediction. Sorry.
Malediction,
Malediction.
yeah. When they went out, I said, Allah's messenger, the good would reach everyone, but it would not reach these two. As in, you just dissuaded them from, the good reaching them, I guess. And he said, why so? I said, because you have invoked curse and hurled malediction upon both of them. He said, don't you know that I have made a condition with my Lord, saying, O Allah, I am a human being, and that for a Muslim upon whom I invoke curse or hurl malediction, make it a source of purity and reward. Translate that for us again, please.
Yes. Translate as in English to English.
Simplify it. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So I think it's worth mentioning the Arabic two words, لعنهما وسبهما, because there's a hadith that says ليس المسلم بالسباب, as in a Muslim is not, I guess, is not a person that would swear. He would not swear at people. But then you get the best Muslim, the Muslim, 1.0, doing just that. So it says Aisha, his child bride, heard him talking to two men that angered him, but she did not know why. So the Prophet Muhammad he swore and cursed at the two men. And when they left, she asked him, "What did those two men do for you to, I guess, swear at them and curse at them?" And
And
he
by the
said,
way, like
"Yeah,
she thinks that this curse will have an effect because he is the prophet, and essentially it's like a request to God to hurt them in a way, right?
yeah." I mean, the reason why we can't curse is because it might come true, but coming from the prophets, I don't see for there to be a reason why not to become
Mhm.
to be
Right.
accepted, or to be answered. So he said, "Oh, do you not know my deal with Allah? We made a deal that any person that I swear at or curse at, that it would be what was the word that he used? A gift, I guess. It would be a prayer for them and like a gift
Mhm.
that would get them closer to Allah. It would give them cookie points." So basically, the Prophet cursing or swearing at anyone is a good thing.
Mhm.
Then I just don't see why he's not walking around swearing and cursing at everyone, since it's a good thing and it doesn't cost anything. Then,
Right.
like, if he would like for people to go to heaven, I guess just curse at your wife, curse at your wives, apologies, so curse at your friends.
Right.
But he just doesn't do that. He did it to the two people that anger them.
Well, he is human at the end of the day. He's not actually, some other species or perfect or anything like
Hmm.
that. But we're supposed to believe that he was. So it's kind of contradictory in that way. Um, but what's funny here is this condition that he made with God. "Ma sharattu alayhi Rabbi." We'll get to that in a future hadith as well. The fact that if he gets to make conditions or gets to have some kind of negotiation with God, that is a very weird thing to choose instead of other things, but we'll talk about that in a second. But he says for a Muslim, like if he insulted a Muslim that way and the Muslim didn't deserve it, or prayed for their demise and they didn't deserve it, but if it's someone else who's not a Muslim, then I guess the covenant, the shart doesn't work.
Yeah.
So he can tell a non-Muslim to f off, and God doesn't owe them anything. But this is silly because this is almost like when a rich person gets away with doing whatever they want because they can afford to pay the fine, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, they can insult the person, the barista at Starbucks. They can, ram their car into someone else's car, and they're fine because they could just pay off the fine. Except Muhammad is not even paying anything from his pocket. Allah is going to give you some hasanat in the afterlife, or is going to take away some of your sayyi'at or something.
Infinite hasanat glitch.
Yeah, like it doesn't cost Allah anything, and it's also messing with the justice system, right? So if someone commits a sin or multiple sins, and then Muhammad calls them a bitch for no reason, and then that reduces their sins, or yukaffir an sayyi'atim, right? Purifies their record. How is that actually fair? Like how did they do any less sin because Muhammad insulted them? It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to know that like he thinks so lowly of an insult that might hurt someone's feeling, that might make them think that they're going to hell because the prophet himself has told them, lan, as a curse. He cursed
Mm.
at them, which is usually a really bad thing from a human because it might be accepted. But then coming from the prophets, they might be really scared. So forget the fact that it's good for them ultimately. In the moment, they were wronged. They
Mhm.
deserve an apology. They deserve it not to happen, I guess. But that's just not the Islamic view of the whole,
Right.
scenario. It's a good thing that this happened for them.
Yeah, like that's a good point. It's first of all, the person would have to know about this deal that he made with God, which again, now we have hadiths, and now I guess you could tell the Muslims, but during the time when he lived, not everyone knew that he made this weird deal with God. But even if they did, that doesn't really address their hurt feelings or the emotions or anything happening in the moment. It's just more like here's a free voucher for, one free hasana or whatever it might
Yep.
be. Here's something that, again, as far as we know, is not really real. So he's using his infinite clout with God to get away with not apologizing to people. Um, and and the way that he says it too, he's like, "Don't you know, Aisha? Don't you know that I'm actually doing them a favor?" Instead of running after them, being like, "Hey, I shouldn't have done that." And also, by the way, here's a coupon for free hasanat. No, he didn't do that. He just said, it's all handled. It's fine.
Yeah, it sounds like he's talking to a child.
Yeah, because she was. Good point. And Muhammad is supposed to be an example for us, as Emir says, the commenter. And then he gets a pass doing bad things. That's the contradictory thing. Like, there's a lot of stuff that Muhammad only gets permission to do, or it's implied or explicitly said. Well, he's the prophet. It's different. But at the same time, he's a qudwa. He's an example for all of us to do. So, yeah, not a great example in this case.
Yeah.
And again, this is not like the most earth-shattering hadith or anything. It's just something to get you thinking about all these little details that are typically ignored. This is another hadith that is similar to that one, and let's not try to read too much into it. I'll try to go over it. It's a bit long. Title is "May She Always Remain Young." So there was an orphan girl with Sulaym, who was the mother of Anas. Allah's messenger saw that orphan girl and said, "Oh, it is you, you have grown. May you not advance in years, may you not grow older." That slave girl returned to Sulaym weeping, and she said, "Oh, daughter, what is the matter with you?" She said, "Muhammad has invoked a curse upon me that I should not grow in age, and thus I would never grow in age." Because the little girl thought that this would actually come true because this is the prophet of God. Um, or she said, "In my length of life." So she was worried that she's cursed, she'll always be a little girl, because Muhammad said that comment in passing. Sulaym went out wrapping her headdress hurriedly until she met Muhammad. He said to her, Sulaym, what's the matter with you?" She said, "Allah's apostle, you invoked curse upon my orphan girl." He said, "What is that?" She said, "She states you have cursed her by saying she might not grow in age or grow in life." Muhammad smiled and said, Sulaym, don't you know that I have made this term with my Lord? And the term with my Lord is that I said to him, I am a human being and I am pleased just as a human being is pleased, and I lose temper just as a human being loses temper. So for any person, and wait, let's, what's the continuation? Next page. For any person from amongst my ummah whom I curse, and he in no way deserves it, let that, O Lord, be made a source of purification and purity and nearness to Allah on the day of resurrection.
Yeah.
So it's a similar thing, But this confuses me because I read a little bit of the explanation behind this. I don't know. Are you familiar with this hadith?
The one that you just read, or
Yeah.
the one you have on? Yeah, yeah. So what I understand is, first of all, he's using it as a get out of the jail free card.
Mhm.
Get out of the jail card. So on this one, he is. It's there's a discussion on what it actually means, because some people think that it's a good thing because she's never growing older. She's never, she'll just remain young her entire life. But the understanding of this hadith is that it's like wishing death upon her. At least that's the opinion that I've found. And yeah, there's, I guess, a lot of debate on this hadith. But the
Mhm.
main opinion that I found is that it is wishing death upon her, as in she would not see another day. She would not grow older. She would not grow to see another day.
Right. Well, from what I'm seeing here, right? Um, it's this explanation is glazing Muhammad from the beginning. He was very kind to his amati. That's ummati? No, ummati, to his
Amati.
people. Amati or ummati?
Where is it? Could you point at it?
Here, I don't know how to point it. First line on the right.
Oh,
Rahiman bi, I think
bi
I can't see
ummati.
the,
Yeah,
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 ummati,
no, no,
his
you're right.
people.
Yeah, yeah,
وكان يلطف الناس. He used to, play jokes with people, or like, talk to them jokingly, especially the young ones, and with love and so on. And here, the point that I understood from this is that basically he hadn't seen her in a while, and he was like, "Oh, you haven't grown at all, and may you never grow," or something like that.
yeah,
Which is fine. Okay, let's say that's what he meant. It's a misunderstanding. But then in the explanation, like when he goes to explain to this slave's owner that, "Oh, don't you know that I made this pact with Allah," and so on and so forth. um, the pact was for if he said something mean or something bad
yeah,
that the person didn't deserve. How the heck is a little 6-year-old or whatever, a child, and they don't say their her age, but a child supposed to know that he made that silly pact, and know that if he said something that sounds mean and she didn't deserve it, it's actually good for her? Like, what? It's not even a
yeah.
situation where he says anything mean, supposedly from his perspective, right? It's a
Yeah, I
misunderstanding.
haven't thought about it. Yeah. So you cannot claim that he was saying something good, because if I was misunderstood, I would explain the misunderstanding. But in his case, he just admitted to the fault and he said, "Yes, you're right, but I have a get out of the jail card."
Right.
Basically. Yeah.
And how is someone supposed to know if Muhammad, if they deserve the insult or the da'wah that, not the da'wah, the curse that Muhammad put on them or not? Because if they think they deserve it, they might actually panic and start thinking, "Oh, no, I have to do something about this, or I have to go beg for forgiveness." But if they don't deserve it, they'll have to think this is a great thing because Muhammad made a deal with God,
Yeah.
allegedly.
Well, it's a
Um,
running theme that you'd only find out if you ask him. So in the first hadith, Aisha asked him, and he didn't even tell the two guys that he cursed at. He just told Aisha, and the two guys probably never found out. They could have left Islam for all we know, because
right,
of that one. Yeah, but
right,
so did the Salim. Had she not gone and asked, the girl would have remained depressed over the fact that she would probably die
right.
soon. Yeah,
And it's funny that he says "sharti ala Rabbi," like my
yeah,
condition on my God, and then they have to explain that. Well, obviously, you can't make a condition on God, so this is a condition that God already agreed to, or something like that. I don't know, but point is, if Muhammad can make a condition with God, or if Muhammad can request something from God, why is his request that, hey, if I insult someone and they don't deserve it, give him some points, instead of, hey, how about we end slavery, like for real? Or if he was going to make shurut, if he was going to actually dictate anything that God would take into consideration, there's so much that he could have done instead of this rule that only serves him in a weird, twisted way. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too far into it.
no, 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 you're absolutely right.
Weird.
Yeah.
Um, Astrology 101, narrated Abu Dhar. Um, I was sitting behind the messenger of Allah, who was riding a donkey while the sun was setting. He asked, "Do you know where this sets?" Meaning the sun. I replied, "Allah and his apostle know best." He said, "It sets in a spring of warm water." And this is from, like, this is a hadith, yes, but there's a verse, I believe
In the
Surah
Quran.
Al-Kahf, yeah,
Yes.
about Dhul Qarnayn, which is supposedly Alexander the Great mythology, by the way, that Muhammad kind of
Misunderstood.
borrowed. And ذو القرنين حتى إذا بلغ مغرب الشمس وجدها تغرب في عين حمئة. This is, let's pause here and talk about it for a second, because I hear this quoted a lot by, critics of Islam, and I hear Muslims shrug it off as if it's no big deal. Um,
Mhm.
so this verse says that when ذو القرنين, oh wait, I'm on the wrong, yeah, here. حتى إذا
Mhm.
بلغ مغرب الشمس, when ذو القرنين reached where the sun sets, or reached sunset, he found it going down in a muddy spring, setting in a muddy spring, and he found there a people. The word for found, wajada, is the same word. He found the sun, he found the people, right? But here you can see two translations. The bottom one is the one that is actually more accurate. I find the Pickthall translation to be, honestly, more often than not, the accurate one. Sahih International has a lot of apologetics baked in. So
Mhm.
until when he reached the setting of the sun, i.e., the west. I don't know how you reach the west. The west is a direction.
Yeah.
Um, he found it as if setting in a body of dark water. As if is not mentioned anywhere or implied anywhere. He didn't found it
Mm.
as if it's setting, because that just means there was a sunset over a body of water. We've seen that before,
Yeah.
right? Like you go to the beach, you see the sun. Obviously, you don't think the sun is going into the water. But here it says he found the sun setting in a muddy pool. Still, some people would point to that, critics would point to that and say, look, Allah doesn't understand astrology, or sorry, astronomy? Am I?
Astronomy.
Astronomy. Damn, I wrote
Yep.
astrology instead of astronomy.
That's why I
um,
laughed. That's
yeah,
okay.
astronomy. I mean, he doesn't. He probably thinks astrology is shirk, and will torture all the astrology
Oh,
girls
he
and
does.
boys. Yeah. But yeah, so critics will point to that and say Muhammad or Allah didn't understand astronomy because they think that the sun sets in a muddy pool. And then Muslims will say, well, obviously, this was Dhul Qarnayn, who, it's not Muhammad. And Dhul Qarnayn saw it as if it was setting in a muddy pool. So nothing is unrealistic here. But then here's a
Yeah.
hadith where Muhammad explicitly, just out of nowhere, no one asked him. He asked the guy, hey, dude, do you know where the sun sets? The guy's like, God knows. And he said, it sets in a spring of warm water, in a afi aynin hamia. He uses the same wording exactly. I don't know how
Mhm.
apologists get out of this one, to be honest.
So there's it's a touchy topic, but Muslim flat earthers believe
Mhm.
in this, and they take it and run so far with it that it's just very accurate to the texts. And it kind of makes sense when you, like, not scientifically, but based on the verse, the way that flat earthers think is very accurate when it comes to taking the information from the Quran and Hadith. So basically, this piece of information was always true and it was always correct until it wasn't, and then it was just a symbol or a metaphor. And we see that all the time. Anytime Islam claims anything scientific, it is accurate at the time until it's not. Then it's just a metaphor.
Or like, no one questions it because no one has seen where the sun sets, at the time.
Yeah.
And maybe it sets in a muddy spring, but also, the sun goes to beneath Allah's arsh every night, right? The sun
Yeah.
goes under God's throne every night, which I had this discussion with a caller on a live stream last week. Even if it's not physically the sun going under God's throne, metaphysically, spiritually, but what is night? Because from space, there is no such thing as day and night. It's only from where we are. Do we see the sun? Do we not see the sun?
Yeah.
But objectively, from an outsider's perspective, or
There is no
if we're
night.
just looking at it, there's no such thing as night and day.
Yeah.
um, so the sun doesn't set in any muddy springs, even metaphysically. But even say, like, it's just bad text, God
Yeah.
meant to say that it seemed to him as if it set in a muddy spring. Why is that detail important, and why didn't he make it clearer? Why can't Allah talk clearly? That's the question.
So it's there's another problem with it. Let me remember. I was about to mention it. Yes, في الثلث الأخير من الليل.
Right.
Yeah. So Allah Himself physically. Uh, there's debate on whether it's physical or not, but the majority believes that it's physical. He descends from the sky,
Mhm.
from the heavens, and asks any prayers that you want answered, anything that you want me to grant to you. So that happens in the last third of the night, every night.
Mhm.
But for him to physically come down from his throne to uh, our sky, it requires both A, him being up there on his throne, and B, him coming down here and being here. So he has to be in 2 points at two different points of time in time.
Mhm.
But we do know that it's always the last third of the night somewhere. So he both has to be um, what do you call it? Uh,
Omnipresent. He has to be
yes,
everywhere.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the only answer that you we can reach.
Right. That's funny because it's essentially the answer to that is it's 5 o'clock somewhere, right? And
Yeah,
that is true. It is 5 o'clock somewhere. People use that as an excuse to drink. They're like, oh, it's not too early. It's late enough somewhere else in the world. It's 5 o'clock.
yeah.
And
It's
so
always
the last third of the night, it's always the last third of the night somewhere on earth. So if Allah's always down and like listening during the last third of the night, physically or metaphysically or whatever, that just means that he's always down here all the time.
yeah,
And why does the proximity to, the person who's closest to night matter at all to Allah? Um, and even if, say, it's the point is that the person stayed up to pray to Allah, so they put in extra effort and God is rewarding them for that, why does Allah want you to disrupt your circadian rhythm to pray late at night? Like, why is that good for him when he created us to value a routine of sleep that evolutionarily does not like to be interrupted and stay up late at night, for most people at least?
yeah.
So it makes no sense that Allah would be like, I created you a certain way, and I want you to go against that just to prove how special I am, how much you love me. What a needy,
Yeah.
contradictory, harmful idea,
And by the way, that goes against his own teachings. وَجَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِبَاسًا وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا.
right? These are
Nighttime
verses
was
from the
created
Quran.
for, yeah, to
Yeah,
sleep.
right.
Yeah,
We created the night to sleep and the day to live, right? Ma'asha.
yeah, exactly.
Um, Yeah, but again, there's so much inconsistency. And you know what's funny? There's a verse that says, وَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا.
Yeah,
If it was from other than Allah, meaning the book of Quran, they would have found in it many inconsistencies, which is a
yeah,
logical flaw of an argument to make on its own, by the way. Um, because if I pull up a phone book right now and every number is accurate and it's all true, does that mean it's from God? Or because the argument he's trying to make is that if there was any لو كان من عند غير الله, if it was from other than Allah, then you would find a lot of inconsistencies in it. When you point out inconsistencies, they say, well, that doesn't count, or that's not an inconsistency. But he's implying that a book with no inconsistency is from God. But there are books with no inconsistency that are not from God.
yeah. I've seen menus without inconsistencies. I've
Yeah.
seen phone books, as he said,
Yeah.
and apparently Al Bukhari.
Oh, there are many inconsistencies there.
Yeah,
All right. Moving on. Was he stoned? So the chapter is called The Superiority of the Prophet's Lineage and the Stone That Greeted Him Before His Prophethood. Ooh, I want to talk about that title afterwards. So Jabir bin, wait, let me read the Arabic one. Jabir bin Samurah reported Allah's messenger as saying, I recognize the stone in Mecca which used to pay me salutations before my advent as a prophet, and I recognize that even now. Any thoughts before I start yapping?
could you go back?
Sure. Um, إني لأعرف حجرا
Yeah.
بمكة كان يسلم علي قبل
يسلم
أن
علي قبل أن
أبعث.
أبعث.
إني
إني
لأعرف
لا.
الآن.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, inanimate objects. do pray and do understand, do have feelings, they're human. They have free will. So I would like to tie this to the whole sun and moon being tortured in hell for the sin
Mhm.
of being followed. Just everything is alive, man. He's a hippie. He was
I mean,
stoned.
pay me. It's funny. This comment, Sarah says, "Pay me salutations" is trying to make a stone said hi to me sound normal. Yeah. So what he's saying is that before he was a prophet, this stone would say hello to him. And I don't say this to disparage anyone who might be hearing voices in their head, because that is, a mental health condition and a problem that you should be seeing someone for. It's a real thing. I don't mean to make fun of it, but it sounds like he was hearing voices before his prophecy, which his prophecy was essentially him hearing voices as well. I'm not saying that's proof that the guy was hearing voices, but he himself says, I used to hear a stone say hello to me. And again, this doesn't prove that he wasn't a prophet or that God didn't speak to him that way. But the question becomes, why would Allah reveal, or God reveal, his proof through talking to a guy and making him hear voices when we dismiss that every other time? At any time that someone says to you, the rock says hi to me, you say, did you take your pills today? Or do you need to talk to someone? You don't say you have the truth and you spoke to God. So why does God make it sound like a crazy guy? Or sorry, I don't mean to say crazy in a disparaging way, like someone who's struggling with a mental health condition.
um, it's stone from the heaven, so must be telling the truth.
Right. Yeah. There's a similar story about the monkeys, but no, that's let's not get into that one right now, because I can't verify its truthfulness or its correctfulness right now.
Yeah.
Last one for now, I suppose. If a
Hello.
housefly falls in the drink, that is the chapter.
Yeah.
There's a chapter
Uh,
for if the house flies into the drink. Um,
so yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
go
So
for
it
it.
says, if a housefly falls in the drink of any one of you, he should dip it in the drink and then take it out. For one of its wings has a disease, and the other has the cure for the disease. So it's carrying both the cure and the disease.
Right. We're kind of going
So
full circle here, because this was one of the first videos I ever made on TikTok, was me pointing out that hadith and how silly it is. And then I was surprised that there's apologetics for that. Well, what do you
oh yeah,
think?
and I know all about them. So let me start from the beginning. So Al-Albani, uh, he's the scholar that takes some hadith that are weak and strengthens them by connecting them to hadith sahiha. And he also throws out some hadith sahiha that were said to be sahiha, accurate, but he just wasn't 100% sure. So he's very strict. So when I was reading his book, I came across this hadith, and in the explanation, he said, there's been some people trying to connect it to science, saying that it was proven by these studies. And those studies should not be taken, even if they support uh, the conclusion. Or, sorry, he said studies in general should not be taken as fact, because the hadith itself is a fact. And if there was a hadith that contradicted a study that contradicted the hadith, then you would not believe in the study. You should not basically ignore all logic or science if it goes against the hadith. And so when I read that, him saying ignore the studies, even though it's supporting what I'm saying, uh, I looked into the study. First of all, I think there were like 11 or 12 doctors. All of them were Muslim, which isn't really
Well,
um,
it was in Saudi
the reason.
Arabia, right? It was
I
in a Saudi
I
university,
cannot
if I
remember.
remember correctly.
Cannot remember. But
Yeah.
it's not even the main thing that disproves the study or disregards the study. It was the way they even reached that conclusion. I believe they found a virus or something on one of the wings, but then could not find the same virus on the other wing. So therefore, one of them is bad, the other one is good. Therefore, Islam is true and Allah exists, and we should do tawaf. Yeah.
I found something else entirely for the apologetics. It was a study also. Don't quote me because I don't have it on me, but I believe it was by a Saudi university or done in a Saudi university, and they were examining how the um, like the structure of the wing has some antimicrobial
Mm,
effects, but it's more like for things landing on the wing or like microbes affecting the fly or something. It's not really the gotcha that apologists think,
mm,
which is there's a disease and an antidote on the other wing. That's not how flies or diseases work at all.
yeah. And the way they see us, people like you and I, they think that we hear, oh, study proved A, therefore A is true, and we just sleep soundly at night. That's not it. We have to check uh, who the study was made by, and what university was it peer reviewed. What was the study itself? If it's at least crucial to whatever it is that we're trying to look into. If it were
Mhm,
such a trivial topic that we looked at a research for, it would not really matter that much. But for a topic that's like such a huge, I guess, scientific revelation, as as seen by Muslims, then I would try to at least look more closely into the study and try to see the reasoning they reached, and it just doesn't make sense. It's a
mhm.
funny study. You'll get a chuckle if you read it. I recommend it.
I want to read a few comments that made me chuckle quietly. Um,
Segue.
so Hassan Radwan says they must have big flies in Arabia because the ones that fell into my drinks usually got both wings wet. Well, you better make sure dip it in. Um, what else? Customer says, "Waiter, what's this fly doing in my soup?" The waiter says, "Looks like the backstroke." um, or the waiter says, "Oh, sorry," and dips it in. It's like all good now. Um, Lean says, I remember when I was a kid, I was told it's miraculous how the Quran said something about a microscopic thing on the wing of a fly and how it was later discovered and being like, wow, that is actually excellent as a demonstration of how a lot of what we think is the foundation of our beliefs as believers is not actually not just not true. It's not true within the lore itself because this was never in the Quran, but Lean must have heard it as there's a verse about something microscopic that they couldn't have known otherwise. And Lean at the time accepted it because it came from a source that they trusted. And that's how it usually works with believers in general. They say because of the scientific miracles, have they even thought about the scientific miracle itself? Or I heard a guy say it was impressive, therefore it is impressive. That's how it usually is.
Sometimes the most convincing lie is the most absurd one. So it feels like growing up when I heard topics like this one, they were so absurd that I was like, who would make this up? Nobody. So it must be true until I knew better.
Right. Like it's so absurd it must be true. No, no. There is absurd. That is absurd.
Yeah.
Um, Also, these studies remind me of the gold causes defects in sperm for men study. Oh,
Oh
that
yeah.
was a study that we dissected on the Discord server, which, by the way, is a great segue. You see how this chat is going between me and Allah, or sorry, I called you Allah. Allah's
You're
his
good.
name on Discord. That's why. Um,
Represent.
yeah, me and Abu. Um, this kind of hangout we have all the time on the server. Sometimes I'm there, sometimes just, a bunch of other people. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want to go through silly studies like, gold affecting sperm production in men, which again is something we already saw on the server. And let me quickly give you an idea. Supposedly, it was a Muslim scientist trying to prove that wearing gold is bad for men because that's a rule in Islam. Men cannot wear gold because it makes them look like women, or tashabbuh bin nisa. You shouldn't try to look like women. So then this guy tried to prove that it damages your sperm or something. And it was a very, very poorly done study. Anyway, point is, you can get a lot of the value that you're getting out of this live stream just, impromptu, and even uh, join the discussion as well if you join the Discord server. So links are in the description. All you need to do is become a supporter of the channel and link your Discord account. But yeah, thank you, Abu, for all your help setting
No
this up
problem.
and for your role on the server as well.
Thank you for the
Um,
community. It's a great one. We all really care about each other. So guys, please join. let us meet you.
Yeah, that would be nice. And let us know if you want to see more of this in the future. There's a lot more hadiths, some of them silly, some of them genuinely disturbing. So, let me know which hadiths. Let me know if you want to see more, and leave some thoughts, timestamps, all that kind of stuff. I like seeing that. And says trouble joining the server. If you have any trouble joining the server, just reach out to me directly or leave a comment and I'll help you out as far as it's attainable for me to do so. So yeah, thank you, Abu. I'm going to remove you now to do the final sending off. You want to say anything before you go?
Just love all your videos, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And yeah, bye-bye, Abu. And special thanks to all the patrons, YouTube members, donors, and members of the community for helping make this happen, including Abu, who was just here. I just recently went through the list and, added a bunch of people who weren't there, took off a bunch of people who are no longer supporters. If you don't see your name here and you think it should be here, please leave me a message, let me know, and I'll add it. And as always, think critically and think for yourself, and consider watching one of these videos next. Bye-bye.